Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first installment of the 2025 webinar series for advisors. We are so happy you could join us today. My name is Allison Helen. I'm the Director of Donor and Advisor Engagement at MCF. Prior to joining MCF, I was actually an attorney in private practice, so I always love these programs and opportunities to engage with advisors. Before we get started, I did want to take an opportunity to thank you on behalf of MCF for all the work you do with your clients, with your colleagues, and in the community to really advance the conversation around philanthropy. We realize that you have a lot of things to discuss with clients and colleagues and many pressing topics, but we appreciate your efforts to put philanthropy on that list of important things to talk about as you continue to better serve clients and help people invest in our community. So we have quite a treat for you today. I'm very excited about today's program. Before we jump in, I did want to share a few reminders with you. See if my slides will work. So we have a couple of events coming up. I'd love for you to save the date for our next webinar, Key Issues Impacting Philanthropy and Foundations Today. If you are working with clients to counsel them through kind of what is a crazy time in philanthropy, this should be a very interesting program for you. We are having two people from Common Fund present. That will be June 3rd from noon to 1 p.m. It will be Zoom. You will be receiving an invitation for that shortly and a link to sign up in the follow-up email to this program. The other event I'd love to have you at is the in-person event, which is Planning Strategies for a Shifting Tax Landscape. Obviously, there's a lot going on right now as far as policy and legislation. Professor Sam Donaldson will be joining us on August 13th at Monona Terrace from 2:30 to 5 p.m. So we'd love to have as many people as possible in our advisor community there. I think it'll be a great discussion with Professor Donaldson. We will be sending out invitations in a few weeks. If you know for sure you would like to attend at this point, shoot me an email and I will make sure to get you registered as soon as that opens up. In the meantime, between webinars and all of our other programs, we do have our Advisor Insights blog set up. So if you're looking for general information on kind of working with MCF and different fund types and just basic topics regarding philanthropic giving, go ahead and visit the website. It's under the Advisor tab, Ideas and Insights, and you'll have a lot of blog postings and materials that could be helpful to you or your clients. Lastly, if you have any ideas for topics, please contact me. I'm always happy to hear from advisors on what would be most helpful for them. For those advisors that are attorneys in Wisconsin, this program has been approved for 1 CLE credit if you are listening to the live stream. If you're not listening to the live stream, you are not eligible for credit. So for those attorneys in the audience, yes, the program has been approved for 1 CLE credit. So with all of that housekeeping out of the way, I am now thrilled to introduce our esteemed speaker today, Attorney Gregory Monday from Reinhardt, Borner, Van Duren, and Madison. Greg represents middle market family businesses and their owners with respect to governance, ownership, and succession. In addition to his work with clients, he's also authored The Lawyer's Guide to Family Business Succession Planning, and he also serves as an adjunct professor at University of Wisconsin Law School, where he teaches business organizations. In addition to that, he's a fellow with ACTEC and a frequent writer and speaker on the topic of family business, including for Wealth Council and the State Bar of Wisconsin. So with all of that out of the way, welcome Gregory Monday, and please take it away.
Right, thank you. So the first part is the most challenging, where I have to share the screen, and you will let me know if I was successful?
Yes, it worked perfectly.
All right. Okay, thank you. I was going to introduce myself and the topic, and you did it. So thank you. And thank you to Madison Community Foundation for allowing me to speak. The program is Family Enterprise, why every family should think like a business. I do work with family businesses, middle market family businesses all the time, every day. I call myself a family business lawyer. That's not a real thing. I mean, and that isn't yet. People don't describe, I don't know anyone else who uses that term, but that really is what I do. I'm defined by the clients that I represent rather than the type of law I do. Although I spend most of my time working on internal affairs for family businesses, including governance, ownership, and succession matters. We're also at Reinhardt, I never say Reinhardt Bernaventer, and they're not all three in the same room at the same time anyway. So I usually just say Reinhardt Law Firm. It's easier to remember. It's not Reinhardt Food Services, it's Reinhardt Law Firm. It's a full service business law firm. I help my clients access all kinds of legal services that they need here at Reinhardt, but also, as we know, Madison is such a great community, and the collegiality of the lawyers here and throughout the state is great. I have very often worked with other lawyers here in town on with the same family businesses, and it's been a real treat. So I look for those opportunities too. I see by the guest list or the attendees that actually it's more friends than people I don't know on this, and so you will expect the unexpected, I guess. Who knows where my mind will take me, but I think this is a really exciting topic, and I'm glad that I'm getting a chance to share it in a way that's a little bit more organized than my usual uh, uh, stream of consciousness. All right, so I'm handling my own slides, so um, I'm looking at a couple of different screens here, but it sounds funny when you say, what does your family do? Think like a business. What do families do? Well, one thing they're great at doing is celebrating. When you've got a wedding, a graduation, a retirement, a golden anniversary, you look around and you're surrounded by family. You have friends, you have colleagues, but when you really want to celebrate something, you're usually surrounded by family. I think I've been to this wedding in this slide. I think actually maybe a couple of times. Another thing that families are good at doing is helping in an emergency. When things get really bad, you need a ride to the hospital. You need someone to cook meals while you're recovering from giving birth and you already have a bunch of little ones running around. You need a loan from your brother or sister. You need a kidney. When I was it's family members. When I was writing this, actually, I felt guilty. I was doing this and I remembered I hadn't given blood in a long time, and I'm O neg. I just want to tell you it was a great experience. I want to give that a plug. Red Cross near West Side. And when you're O negative, you're a universal donor. I mean, they treat you a little bit more special. So uh, if you're O neg, you want to go as often, and they need that anyway. All right. So what else do families do? Raising children, babysitting, play dates, vacations, money for tuition. Often that comes from family members. If you're saying to somebody, can you take the baby Friday night? You're probably talking to a family member. I work with a lot of families and they do all of those things, but they do one more thing, and that is they have a family business. And the family business is a good thing. So sometimes family business can be complicated, and sometimes there can be stress from the business that pours over to the family, or stress from the family that pours into the business. And I remember one day I was working with some clients and we were going through a little bit of a discord in the family. And so I said, why do you have this business? At that point, it was down to siblings. It was co-owned by siblings, and the senior generation had passed. So I said, you sure you still want to do this, or do you want to sell the business and then everybody could take their share of the proceeds and go their separate ways? So we talked about what are the things that a family business can provide a family that they wouldn't otherwise have. And we came up with 4 reasons. One is income. And the income from a family business can come in a number of different ways. It's always nice to have supplemental income. And if the family business is not your primary occupation, you may receive dividends or distribution of profits. But if it is your occupation, you also can receive income in the form of compensation. Also, you may lease property or equipment to the business. Sometimes the business makes loans to family members. So cash flow on income is one thing that a family business provides as a resource. The second thing is long-term investment or appreciation. I think it's reasonable for people to believe that their family business over time will appreciate more consistently, more reliably, and to a greater extent over the long term than what they might be able to achieve through passive investment. In my experience, that is a valid assumption. Another is occupation. A family business provides work experience, maybe sometimes the first work experience that family members have. Sometimes it can become their permanent occupation, or it can provide board service and other business opportunities and experiences for family members. And then finally, the one that I appreciate the most, and I'll emphasize a lot today, is culture and legacy. It really is the thing that I envy the most. And I remember sitting with my family, my children, my older parents around the Thanksgiving table and thinking about how we don't have a shared activity like a family business, and that it would be good to create some kind of activity for us. But in the meantime, I was starting to get groggy from the turkey. So I just talked about what are our values. I took the opportunity that I know my family business clients do all the time, and that is to talk to the family about what are our shared values, what is our culture. And a family business provides that opportunity to have the family members engage in an ongoing important project because it requires their collaboration. It works best when they share their talents, when they stick together, when they agree on a shared culture and shared values. They play on the same team, they stay close to one another. They're in communication much more than other families. If they develop a successful culture, it becomes a source of pride, and they end up building things that will last and will benefit future generations. They also invest in their community very often. I know family businesses that won't move out of communities or won't sell because they don't want the business to move out of the community that is part of what they love. They establish scholarships, they create medical research endowments, they support the arts. And in their families, these projects help reinforce the culture of responsibility, achievement, and leadership. Those are great things. How can we bring that to families that don't have a family business? It doesn't always happen like this. It's the bad ones that get all the press. But this is what it can be like. And in my experience, this is what it is often like. So when I say a family should think like a business, I'm not, and it sounds funny, I'm not saying that in a harsh way, like we're going to terminate grandma because she's not meeting her productivity goals. Although I do want to complain about my parents for a minute. And since we've got time, I'm going to do that here in a public forum. When my parents retired from their day jobs, they decided to go and get advanced degrees. I think my dad was 58, my mom was younger. And I thought they'd go law, veterinary, who knows? And they decided to go back to Marquette for master's in theology. I said, how are you going to monetize that? And they absolutely didn't have a plan. And so if I were truly thinking of a business in the crass way, I certainly would have questioned whether they should remain on. But instead, actually, when you think about culture and values and legacy, they were doing the heavy lifting. They've brought great things to our family and the values that they passed on to us. But what I mean when I say think like a business, I mean act collectively as an economic enterprise to create greater opportunities for present and future family members to achieve their occupational and personal objectives, and to perpetuate the family bonds, culture, and values around worthy causes and leadership in the community. Sometimes this idea of a family enterprise happens when one of my clients is going to sell the family business, and we think about what to do with the sales proceeds. If we divide the proceeds up among the family members, some of them will succeed, but some of them may not. And they also won't have a shared endeavor. So in the alternative, we talk about keeping the proceeds together and managing the investments like we still have a business. We don't make widgets, whatever those are. We make investments. We still have the benefits of a family business. So imagine a family enterprise that pools the family's cash and marketable securities, holds the family cabin or other recreational or investment real estate. The recreational properties, the cabin, I call them legacy properties. Invests in new ventures, either in the community or entrepreneurship within the family, and manages the family charitable giving through a large donor advised fund that all the family members contribute to. Just think of it as a business that makes investments, makes family loans, holds legacy properties. These aren't new ideas, but I'm suggesting a way of putting them together that is a different way of structuring it and of thinking about it. If the family's not selling the business, then if the family doesn't have a business to sell, or I have some family businesses create a parallel family enterprise like I'm describing. But if it's a family that doesn't have a business, when's the natural time for them to start talking about a family enterprise like this? It's when they get to the point where they're ready to pass large amounts of wealth to the next generation, usually using the kinds of estate planning techniques that have become very familiar. Things like family limited partnerships, grantor trust, spousal lifetime access trust, split interest charitable trust. This brings us to our first question. This was submitted in advance, so I'll read it. Longtime listener, first time caller, thank you for calling the program. Do you believe the current tax law will actually sunset at the end of 2025? I'll take my answer off the air. All right, thank you for that question. I don't think that the current estate tax exclusion levels will be sunset at the end of the year. I do believe they will be extended, or the law will be made even more favorable for family wealth transfers. However, we don't need that kind of estate tax or gift tax exclusion in order to implement a family enterprise like I'm describing. It can be done over time. The key is to start when the senior generation is really transferring that wealth to the next generation, whatever the timetable for that is, or however long that may take. It helps to do it at the beginning. Now, the sunset is important if people are holding back on large gifts or large wealth transfers and are thinking that they'll do it before the end of the year if there is a sunset. Then the time would be now to think about these family enterprise ideas. And it's easier, you'll see after I describe how these are created, it's easy to dismantle a family enterprise vehicle, but it's a little bit harder to put one together after you've already made the transfers. It's, in fact, to illustrate the point that the current level of estate tax exclusions is not necessary for these techniques, it's funny to think that back in 1993, when I started practicing as a young 14-year-old prodigy, fresh out of law school, the estate exclusion was only $600,000, the lifetime exclusion. A popular technique in those days was a family limited partnership, and sometimes that would include real estate and other investments. Sometimes it was just marketable securities. And the way it would work, for those of you who are millennials or younger, the way it would work is you would put investments into a limited partnership. The parents would be issued a 1% interest in the partnership as a general partner. They'd be issued 99% as limited partners, And then they would gift to their children over time, sometimes using annual exclusions, sometimes using that $600,000 lifetime exclusion, but they would gift limited partnership interests over time. And there was valuation discounting involved. This still happens today, but it's not as prevalent just because there aren't as many people who have the level of wealth that is taxed by the transfer tax system these days. But so it was very common to do this. The IRS didn't always respect the discounting that was used for the limited partnership interest, particularly if they believed that the only reason for the limited partnership was for to reduce transfer taxes. In other words, what we would talk to the clients about is there a legitimate business reason for you to create these investment partnerships? And at the time, I was just a young pup and I hadn't really thought about it a lot. But over time, I started to realize that these collective investment vehicles were actually kind of a nice thing for the family. One of the things I started advising people was that if they really wanted the IRS to respect it, first of all, we would think about what the other benefits were for the family and not do it really if there weren't other benefits or they weren't going to take it seriously. But the other thing is, I would also talk to the junior generation and ask them whether they would keep it in place after the senior generation uh, terminated their ownership interest. And I think that was a key thing for the family to think about in advance. And so we would typically leave the collective investment vehicle in place plan to leave it in place at least for 3 or 4 years after the senior generation left ownership. But it created this dynamic where actually some of these families really started to like having those collective investment vehicles and actually would create other relationships with their siblings and their siblings' children where they were pooling their resources for these collective investments. That was a pretty uh, important dynamic for me to witness early on. And as I started to work with family businesses and then see how sometimes they would pool their investments, I started to realize that there was something here that was pretty important. So let's look at what a family enterprise can do. First, let's start with cash. Often family businesses will make loans to family members who have temporary need of greater cash than their normal cash flow would provide. So these would be like for education, down payment on a first home purchase, capital contribution to for a professional partnership, or capital to start a business. Some families, whether they have family businesses or not, will create what they will call a family bank for those purposes, where they really do have a pool of cash or more liquid assets that are available for those types of things. And it's available to everyone, just given the rhythm of life cycle, raising kids, going to college, buying a first home, starting a business. There are times when some family members have greater need for cash than other family members and vice versa. So having this pool of cash available as a family bank can be a helpful resource. Provides low interest rates usually, and the interest is paid back to the family. It doesn't replace third party lenders, it doesn't replace commercial lenders, but it does make it easier often for family members to get loans from commercial lenders. So you can imagine if the family is able to provide cash for a down payment on a home, it may make it easier for the younger generation to obtain commercial loans. These things are always subordinate to third-party lenders, but it really is a helpful resource. That's one of the things that these collective family enterprises can do. Marketable securities, back to the family limited partnership concept, but developed to a greater extent. So a family can create a partnership or an LLC tax this partnership to hold the family's investment in marketable securities, not just for purposes of valuation discounts, but actually for the benefits that a large portfolio has over an individual portfolio. So imagine for a young person, if they had $500,000 to invest versus a young person who has 5% of ownership in an investment portfolio that the family has funded with $10 million. They have so many more access to so many more types of investments, experiences with investing. It's a much better situation. For example, a large portfolio may be able to access superior management, superior asset management for lower fees because of economies of scale. They're better able to diversify. They can invest in illiquid investments, things that an individual might not be able to do. The family legacy properties, I'm talking about the homestead, the family farm. In Wisconsin, the big one is the up north cabin. There's the Florida condo, or if you're a skier, the condo in Colorado. Co-ownership of these properties can be a source of discord in the family around the cost and use of the properties. I've seen it. When that's the only thing that the family co-owns, they may not have the resources or the experience to manage the property equitably. But if the family's collaborating on a family enterprise, they have more of an infrastructure for governance, management, and economic resources to more easily co-own these properties, these legacy properties. In these cases, the family cabin or the family farm is just one item in the family's portfolio, and they manage it similar to the other family resources, assets, and investment. Before we leave this topic, I just want to point out, this is what a cabin looked like when I was a kid. This is what it looks like now. In my cabin, do you think there was internet and a bathroom? There was. Alternative investments, direct investment. I mean, two things. One, and the other one I'm really excited about. So one is private equity, venture capital. I'm talking about investments in private funds or early stage companies. These investments might be inappropriate for an individual family member because of the risk and the illiquidity associated with them, but they may be more appropriate to be a small element of a much larger portfolio. I hope nobody is offended by me saying that, but and saying that you should always approach those types of investments with caution. But some families have really developed experience and resources to invest in these things and to prudently operate in those asset classes. And for those families, it can be a pretty exciting element of the family enterprise. But more commonly is the second thing I mean, and that is startup loans and angel investing in family ventures, in business ventures of family members, family entrepreneurs. A family bank or an investment partnership can help family entrepreneurs pursue their business ideas with a greater chance of success. So, for example, the people in this slide with a help of loan from their family started a garden supply center. And maybe the family loaned them the money. Maybe the family owns a percentage of the LLC, or maybe the family owns the building that they're occupying and then receives rent from them at maybe a lower rate than they would otherwise experience. The family members who successfully start their business then become a resource for other family members. They gain value experience as entrepreneurs, and they can share that experience with other would-be entrepreneurs in the family. I've seen studies that show that a majority of entrepreneurs actually come from families with a family business or entrepreneur history or experience. It's not the genetics, it's the role model, the family resources, the intellectual capital that enables them to envision themselves as entrepreneurs in the younger generation. And then finally, part of the family enterprise, of course, is the charitable giving. Collective and coordinated charitable giving by the family can make a greater impact on the charity and the community. And it can be done more tax efficiently, especially with a donor advised fund. I think most of you on the call know that and understand the reasons. It can bring the family together around a major philanthropic project like the ones you see in the slide, or the family can give to philanthropies that are important to particular family members. Also, this is a good place to start the educational experience for the younger family members. They work with the donor advised fund. They can see how the portfolio is constructed. They can review the annual investment results. They start to understand tax law and sensitivities a little bit better. And they can help vet organizations that are candidates for distributions from the fund. All of these great experiences for them to have, for them to get used to good financial hygiene in their own affairs or as contributors to the family enterprise. So I hope I've made the case for why you would think about having a family enterprise and describing a little bit about what a family enterprise would do. Later in the presentation, I'm going to describe what the actual legal elements and entities would be in a family enterprise. But now I want to talk about the elements of the family business that the family enterprise should try to emulate, and I think can emulate. So I'll mention 9 features of a family business that I think are important in a family enterprise. And one obvious one is the power of capital. You can do more with more. A family's capital includes both the economic capital and, in that respect, achieving economies of scale, but also the human capital, the skills, knowledge, experience, creativity, time, and diversity of perspectives of all the family members. These can help make the endeavors of individual family members more successful and more productive. If the family doesn't collaborate on their economic efforts, each family member is really left on their own to kind of reinvent the wheel. They don't know what they don't know, and they're not learning much except the hard way. But if they pool their resources and talents, they'll be more likely to learn, more likely to benefit from the family's knowledge, and more likely to succeed. Another element of a family business that a family enterprise can emulate is having one trusted, skilled team of advisors. I call them the dream team. In a family business, you have that C-suite, you have those key executives who are with the family business. In my experience, stay with the family business a long time. And actually, sometimes against my better judgment, those key executives are also providing some other benefits to the family through, for example, serving as fiduciaries in their trusts and other engagements that are not necessarily part of the business, but are really important to the family unit. You don't have, as a family, a group of key executives if you don't have a family business, but you really can replicate that by finding a team of advisors, one team of advisors that work well together, fit with the family well, can be trusted with the financial affairs of the family, and also provide a way for a natural succession of these advisors as time goes by and there's generational turnover. I'm talking about legal, accounting, investment advisors, banking, insurance, and other service providers that are important to the family. Real estate, property management might be one, bookkeeping might be one. This is definitely superior to every family member going out and finding their own advisors. I have heard, really not just on one occasion, family members who are about to experience some liquidity, and one of the younger family members saying, I'm going to take my share of the proceeds and give it to the guy who was my college roommate, because he now provides investment advice 3 years out. And look, I was someone's college roommate once too. It worked out now, but it's been like 31 years. Well, no, actually 40 years if you count undergrad. So I'm not saying it's the college roommate part, but sometimes maybe they're a little greener than what you would hope. Um, and the family can access a little bit better than that. We can give the college roommate a few dollars, but formal decision making. I always encourage my family businesses to have a board of directors, often including independent directors. I think it's really important for family businesses to have a formal way of making decisions. A lot of times you'll have founders who are running a family business. They've got amazing instinct. They know everything there is to know about the industry they're in, and they can make decisions on the fly, and they're always right. That doesn't translate into the next generation when you have multiple business owners and they don't have that kind of experience. They didn't create and grow the business. They're inheriting a ship that's already out of port, so to speak. So I think that it's really important for those families to have a formal decision-making process. Similarly, in the family business, in the family enterprise, if the family is going to engage in collective investing, this is an opportunity for them also to engage in formal decision-making. The family can establish boards or committees of decision makers or advisors, like a board of directors. They'll do their due diligence, they'll obtain professional advice, they'll discuss the costs, benefits, and risks before recommending or adopting a course of action. You see how this would be very different from the way an individual might approach their own investment decisions. Fourth thing of a family business to emulate is the educational opportunities, both for individuals and for the family as an institution or a unit. So having an infrastructure for formal decision-making about family investments, ventures, and charitable giving creates a venue for teaching next generation family members how to evaluate and make financial decisions. If family businesses sometimes have junior board members or observers who sit in on board meetings and learn a lot about how decisions are made and how a company is managed. I also always encourage with my family businesses that the next generation should sit on boards of tax exempt organizations to get valuable board experience. In this slide, this child has been given a little cash. The mandate to invest is an educational opportunity. This is an exaggeration and not based on a true story, but there are pieces that younger family members, not that young, can be given as projects. These systems also establish institutional knowledge in the family, which helps the family continue its success in future generations. You're not losing a whole generation at one time. People are cycling onto these boards, onto these investment committees within the family over time and are learning and keeping that knowledge within the family. Accountability kind of goes, it's the other side of the formal decision-making coin. Just as a family business would at the end of the year review their financial decisions and the results of their business plan and budgeting from the prior year, a family enterprise can also aggregate their results, formally analyze and disclose those results to their investors, to the family as a whole, and learn from that process, learn to be better decision makers, and also recognize when their decision making was successful. Family businesses provide opportunities. I mentioned before, it's just a fact that greater resources tend to lead to greater opportunities. Children with strong and broad family support have a greater hope of pursuing their occupational objectives. Availability of learning opportunities within the family venture, opportunities to work on philanthropies that the family supports, funds for education, training, and entrepreneurship. These are all resources that create opportunities for the next generation. And then here's the one that is the most important: cultivating the shared culture. I love this slide. This is what I was talking about at Thanksgiving dinner. You can see the older gentleman who maybe it looks like he's a farmer, and he's spending time with the next two generations, just looking at the land that's provided for their family. Not everyone in that family is going to be able to work on that farm or go into farming, but they have an appreciation for what came before them. And I can tell you, as grandparents, it's comforting to see your children and grandchildren stick together. Why is that? You instinctively know that they're stronger together than they are apart, or particularly when they're at odds. And it goes back to what families do. They celebrate, they help in an emergency, they raise children. When you see your children and your grandchildren happy together with one another, you feel that they will be happier, safer in life, and more successful. For many families, the basic culture is simple, and this is what I tell my family: stick together, celebrate, help, teach, be grateful, use your talents. The fit take care of the young, or the old, or the ill. Pay it forward, keep it going. I can't even say the rest. Our time is together is beautiful, but too brief. Make the most of it. A family enterprise is a practical application. Let me say that again. A family enterprise is a practical application of the family culture, and that shared experience can reinforce that culture. Number 8, engage in service to the community. Family businesses have a natural platform for service to the community, charitable giving, and many of them provide great and important support to the communities. Madison knows that, as well as any community. But similarly, a family enterprise can be a platform for service to the community and philanthropic projects for any family. A family enterprise can pursue ambitious charitable giving projects using their economic resources, time, creativity, and expertise of family members. Also, charitable giving can support tax-exempt activities in which family members are involved, such as the arts, libraries and education, food banks, neighborhood improvement. These projects provide family members with experience, confidence, and goodwill in a community, which can lead them to greater personal and professional success. And then finally, the strength of the family is something that family businesses demonstrate, something to emulate. It's not just the obvious traits. The ongoing collaboration of family members can lead to discovery of strengths, talents, and opportunities that might otherwise be missed. Discovering these aptitudes in turn makes the family stronger. I can't always promise there'll be a trophy, except in my family, there is kind of a traveling trophy, but there'll be trophy moments. All right. How do you make it happen? I described this awesome thing. Monday, tell me, what do we do? Where do we start? Lawyers and other service providers can help the family envision the plan. I always like to do an org chart, implement it, and operate a family business enterprise by starting with the legal structures. For the cash and investment, the family bank and the investment portfolio, usually that's a limited partnership or a limited liability company taxed as a partnership, or it can be actually multiple LLCs. We have situations where we have different LLCs for different asset classes, and the family members or family trusts are invested in at different levels in the different LLCs, but they're all managed collectively. For the legacy property, those fabulous cabins and other properties, usually that's held in an LLC. And for investment real estate, either an LLC or a limited partnership. And then if you're really all in on this, if your family is committed to this family enterprise, you can create a management company, maybe organize that as a corporation. It doesn't have to be huge. It can have one or two people working in it, or it can be a part-time thing. But this would be the place where the decision making for the whole portfolio is done, where the property management is taken care of, the investment strategies are pursued, all of those things, the decision making that goes across the entity from a legal standpoint. This family corporation, or it can be an LLC, can be the center of that family enterprise. And then in addition, the charitable giving piece, I like to use a donor advised fund. I've listed on the slide some of the advantages that a donor advised fund has over a family foundation, for example. Simple to start, simple to operate, better tax rules in a lot of ways, and no required annual distributions. And so the family members can, for a while, maybe save some, keep their powder dry for a really big impact contribution or program. Okay, so I spend all day, not all day, but I spend a lot of my day thinking about governance. I really think it's important, whether it's a family business or a family venture, if it's going to last beyond one generation. To me, governance is the most important part of that. So with family enterprises, I'm going to describe a couple of the levels of governance that I often incorporate into these family enterprises. And the first one, at the very tippy top, is the family council. This is a way for either all family members to be present and give input and hear about the family enterprise all at the same time, or it can be representatives of branches of the family if it's a really large family. Usually the family council, although they're the overarching body, they don't really have legal authority to do anything, although the family often respects their decisions. Sometimes they do have authority to remove and replace fiduciaries within the family enterprise. So I mentioned that you could have a family management company that is really the legal decision maker and the legal entity that has responsibility for exercising powers over the family entities. The family council is advisory, but most often the wishes of the family as expressed through there are taken seriously and accommodated. And then arising out of the family council often are assignments to family committees. So some examples of committees might be investment committee, family loans committee, family employment, charitable giving. These committees are a small group of family members who are really committed to a particular issue in the family enterprise and are often volunteering their time to work on that project and then provide that advice to be implemented in the appropriate entity. And then I mentioned with my family businesses, I like to see board of directors with independent director presence. I think they bring so many things actually to a family business: the skill, the diversity of experience and knowledge, the objectivity, the outsider's perspective. They can also be a resource in terms of early intervention in family disputes or family discord. And also, they do tend to, I want to say force, but they do tend to influence the family to make more formal processes for making decisions and also for analyzing those results. They make it more likely that people will be held accountable for what their activities have been within the family business. Likewise, I think that a family enterprise can benefit from a board of directors as well, whether it's all family members or if there's an independent director presence. And it can be structured in different ways, but very often that board of directors will be at the management company level. And then trust fiduciaries. So I think that it's important and very helpful for family wealth to pass through trust. Many different reasons for that. Tax law is part of it, but I also think that there are other reasons for that, which leads us to the second question that I got before the presentation, and that is, how do you deal with balance between wealth enrichment versus entitlement? And I think you've heard me talk about legacy and values, that helps. But actually, part of this family enterprise, one of the first ones that I worked on, where we were just creating it from whole cloth, was a situation where there was a lot of family wealth in cash and marketable securities, and the next generation was pretty young, going through teenage stuff and young adulthood. And the senior generation said, I'm not so comfortable passing wealth to them in a trust in the form of cash and marketable securities, because they're going to know that there's just one trustee standing between them and available cash, basically. And I think that sends the wrong message. And so we thought about what would be ways of mitigating that effect. And then we were talking for other reasons about putting the marketable securities in investment vehicles, because we wanted the board of directors of the operating company to serve as a board for the family's marketable securities and other investments. And then we thought, you know what? This really actually could help us address our other problem. Because if a child is a beneficiary of a trust, and that trust holds a minority interest in an LLC that's managed over here by a board of directors and has a management structure and officers, and it's co-owned with other trusts in the family, it doesn't seem to them then that there's this thin curtain between them and access to cash for whatever they want to do. It sends a whole different message. And from a legal standpoint, it also does create a higher level of protection. Heaven forbid one of these younger beneficiaries would find a lawyer to try to break up the trust or harass the trustee into distributing the assets. With that double level of structure, it's much less tempting and also much less likely from a legal standpoint to be successful. Now, as many of you know, in Wisconsin, we have different roles that fiduciaries can play. I am a huge fan of corporate trustees. I really think that a directed trust is a great thing, and it's always important to have a corporate fiduciary involved in those directed trusts, and then other fiduciaries being the directing parties who can direct how the trust is invested in the family enterprise, and also trust protectors who are there to oversee and make changes to fiduciary positions or to trust language to can't change the situs of a trust, sometimes done for tax reasons. All of these things can work together. I think they work really well in a family enterprise when you're using the same group of fiduciaries across the whole family. And many of these trusts are multi-generational. Dynasty trusts, GSTs, generation skipping transfer tax trusts that I think are managed best when you have the same advisors, the same fiduciaries throughout the generations. And then finally, after the legal entities are established, very often the families that engage in these family enterprises like to create a family constitution. I also know that family business owners like to do that as well. It includes a mission statement and maybe the principal statement of the family's cultures and values. It's not technically a legal document. It It usually does not have enforceable terms in it, but it's a document that really most families should think about adopting. In addition, the family councils and the committees that are created in these family enterprises would be governed by charters, and those are almost like bylaws for a corporation. They state out what the purpose is, and they contain a lot of the procedural rules, including things like conflict of interest rules and how boards or committees are composed and what their objectives are. And then finally implementing it, have those meetings, generate those reports. The family enterprise will function best if its structure and procedures require periodic, disciplined reporting, regular formal meetings for governing bodies. There's a lot of software. Is it still called software? It's applications that can be used and accessed by these families now that facilitate the tracking and reporting of family investments and other assets, including legacy assets and their value. These applications can receive real-time feeds from custodians and advisors, and they can provide real-time access to updates from any authorized user. This is an area actually where the younger family members may be able to teach the more senior family members, and I always like to see that. And then finally, I like to see my families have at least one annual retreat or other event where the whole family gets together and they're present for 2 or 3 days of planned meetings and activities, but a lot of free time to relax and enjoy. Family enterprise really gives context to that. So finally, we're back to what do your families do? Families have tremendous resources, but if they don't have a family business, sometimes those resources dissipate over time. But with determination, creative thinking, and with the help of the right advisors, a family can start thinking and acting like a business with all the benefits a family business can provide. Then a family can be even better at the things a family does. There'll be more to celebrate. There'll be more resources in a family emergency, and the children they raise will have more opportunities. That's my idea. I hope it resonates with you. I hope it helps your client. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Greg. Before we wind things up today, does anybody have questions for Greg? If you want to drop them into the chat, we do have a couple minutes to address them. All right. Well, one follow-up question to, I think the second question you got, Greg, is do you have any general guidance on how much is enough versus how much is too much when you're thinking about, dividing your overall wealth with children and next generation?
That's a great question. I really like to kind of back into it. What do we want for them? What standard of living do we want for them? What kind of portfolio or wealth can provide that for them if they're doing all the other right things, if they're being productive themselves? So what is it that we're trying to achieve for them? And then for different families, it's going to be different things. We certainly don't want wealth that is going to be freely available to enable somebody not to be productive or constructive, raising children, or doing something that's satisfying as an occupation.
Great. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat, so I will go ahead. Thank you again, Greg, so much for this presentation. It was great. If people have follow-up questions, can they contact you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
You can just Google my name and likely you'll find me or you'll find something about Monday. Usually it's a pretty good bet to Google my name in Madison.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for attending today, and we hope to see you at the next webinar in June. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.